All right, welcome everyone. So nice to have you guys here. You trekked in 97-degree weather, I hear. I saw many sweaty people walking in, and it's okay because we all sweated today in DC. So thank you again for those of you who are here in person. Thank you to those who are joining via live stream. We are excited to have you here. I am Amber Northern. For those of you who don't know, I oversee the research that we do here at the Fordham Institute, along with a rock star team of 4 other people who are also in this room. So kudos to our team. Yay us. I wanted just to, before we get started, to let you know that you can follow us at Education Gadfly. So that's important. And I'm not on Twitter, but for those of you who are, it is hashtag #CCParents. So please feel free to follow along and invite people, other people you know, to listen in and tweet your questions over, because at the end of the panel here, we'll be asking for questions about the last 20 minutes or so. So feel free to start sending those over. As most of you guys know, just as a little bit of a prelude, we've been big supporters of the Common Core standards since they were unveiled. No big surprise there. But we've also tried in both of our research and commentary to bring to light all of the hurdles in implementing the standards. So we've tried to be, not just cheerleaders, obviously, but approach our work and our commentary, not with rose-colored glasses, and try to see, okay, what's going on here and how can we be helpful and useful in making implementation go a little smoother. So we released in that vein a couple of weeks ago a report called Common Core in the K-8 Classroom. It delved into some of these things that we have been talking about over the last few years with Common Core. It talked a little bit about how teachers are teaching the standards, what they like and don't like. We talked a little bit in the report. We found quite a bit of data about how teachers were changing their instruction in response to the standards. And again, a lot of their hurdles in having to adjust and implement these more rigorous standards. We're going to talk about all that stuff a little bit later in the panel, but in this event, our primary purpose, what we really want to drill down here, are the ongoing issues in communicating with parents about the standards. So that was something that surfaced in our report. It hasn't gotten a lot of serious attention lately. I think that all of us have heard these anecdotes on social media and whatnot about parents against the Common Core and all these groups and whatnot. But what we haven't really seen a lot of is serious, relevant discourse about how do you talk to parents about this stuff. And so that's our primary purpose here today. So before we start that discussion, though, we thought, okay, let's try a little bit something different to get things kicked off and started. I'm a former teacher. A lot of those folks in the audience today are former teachers. A lot of those on the panel are former teachers. So we thought we are going to allow you guys a little bit of insight of what a Common Core lesson looks like. And in so doing, we're going to frame some of the issues that we think are either new and or confusing to parents. So I think that this little demo lesson will give you a good framework for what we're going to be discussing today. And as I mentioned, we'll leave time towards the end for your questions, so you don't need to act like students and raise your hand during the lesson here today. So we've got with us a real live elementary school teacher who's been teaching the standards for several years. He's been helping other teachers to implement them as well. His name is Nick Pyzik. Nick has taught 3rd and 4th grade for the last 10 years for Frederick County Schools in Frederick, Maryland. And those of you who are from DC know it's just right up the road, not too far away. For the last 3, he's served as a math specialist and interventionist. He has a master's in elementary education with an endorsement in instructional leadership. He's going to do a quick demo lesson for us. It's about 8 minutes or so. And then he's going to be joined by Jennifer Bay Williams, also here today. She's going to do a quick debrief on his lesson afterwards for a few minutes, meaning she's going to talk us through these things that might be new to parents and teachers. I'm going to go ahead real quickly and introduce Jennifer as well, so then after the lesson she can come up without me having to come up here again and introduce her. She's the lead author in our report that I mentioned we released recently. She's professor and department chair at the University of Louisville in Kentucky. She's a math teach educator. She's an author. She's written many articles about K-12 math education. She's written a best-selling book on how to teach math. And she's currently a member of the NCTM Board of Directors and former president of the Association of Mathematics Teacher Education. Like Nick, she walks the walk. She's been working with teachers not only in Connecticut, Kentucky, but around the country on implementing the Common Core. So with that, I'm going to ask Nick to come on up, put his teacher hat on, and get us through a demo of a Common Core lesson. Clap. Yay.
Well, first I would like to start off by thanking Amber and the Fordham Institute for asking me to do this little demo lesson today. Like they said, I've been in the weeds working every day with elementary math students for the last several years, and today we're going to focus on looking at a third grade lesson that revolves around addition, subtraction, computation. So the standards that it's going to be focusing on is 3 NBTA 2, which specifically just states fluently add and subtract within 1,000 using strategies and algorithms based on place value, properties of operations, and or the relationship between addition and subtraction. This is just a great standard to highlight what's come out. Some of the findings come out of the report about using multiple strategies. So I am going to be presenting a problem. I am going to, unfortunately, Amber, have them put their student hats on a little bit to think about how to, they might approach solving this problem. And then we're going to look at a couple other sample student strategies. So I just have a brief word problem here. You can read it on the screen. It just says, Kayla sees a road sign with cities and their distances from her current location. The sign shows that Baltimore is 309 miles away and Annapolis is 280 miles away. In all, how many miles is between Baltimore and Annapolis? So right now, whether you're on the web or you're in the room, I would like you to think like a third grader for a moment. How would you approach this problem? How would you solve it? If you wouldn't mind, I just want you to turn to somebody. You don't have to, but turn and talk to somebody. Just how did you approach this? How did you solve it? What did you come up with as a solution? Yeah. All right, I'm going to ask you to stop talking, wrap up your conversation. For those in the room, I know we can't do it with those people on the web, but how many of you used the standard algorithm? Just raise your hand if you feel comfortable doing that. Oh. The standard algorithm, the traditional way of stacking 308 on the top, 309 on the top, and putting 280 at the bottom, and using crossing out the tens place and putting a 10 over top and subtracting right to left. Did anybody think of it that way? Okay, so a few of us. How many use some other approach to think about that problem? Okay, so a lot of other hands. And that's really what we would be looking at for students. So you can take your third grader hat off. And so thank you for engaging in that. While I would be walking around doing this lesson with students, I would be posing questions like the ones you see up on the screen. I certainly wouldn't be doing all of those at one time, but maybe as I'm walking around and seeing students working, I might pose one or two to them, just to gauge their thinking, see where they're at with this content and with this standard. So it might just be what's happening in the story, giving them an idea of where are they thinking? Are they thinking about it as subtraction? Are they thinking about it as addition? What approach are they taking? What strategies might they use? They probably have experienced a couple of different strategies for adding and subtracting prior to this. So do they already have one that they know they can use efficiently, or do they have one that maybe isn't the most efficient, but it works for them for that time? Possible strategies students might use, and you might see, is adding up, or called partial sums, where they start with 280 and add up to 309 in little jumps in using their place value understanding. 280 is a nice number. It's a multiple of 10. They can then start adding 10s to get close to that 309. So they might make a jump at 20 and then jump 9 to add and find that it's 29 miles, the difference between. Another student might use a different strategy that's similar because they're using their place value knowledge to break down the number, thinking about it from a subtraction context, counting back or partial differences. So they might jump back 9 in their head, or using paper and pencil to get to 300, and then again a nice another benchmark friendly number for them, 20, jumping down 20 to get to 280, still coming up with that same answer of 29 miles. Another student might think about it, especially since this is a distance problem and it's very linear, that it could be end up on a number line. So they start at 280, jump up to 300, and then jump 9 more. Or they could start at 309, jump back, and jump back one more time, jump back 9, jump back 20. And like I said at the beginning, they might use what we call this US standard algorithm, where traditionally we put the larger number on the top, subtract the smaller number using borrowing and carrying, still using our place value understanding. So, and that's just one problem. That might be 10 minutes, and then would lead into maybe 2 or 3 more problems, now knowing where my students are, focusing on making them efficient problem solvers and fluently adding and subtracting those larger numbers. So thank you for going through those strategies and that little demo lesson with me. So now,
thank you, Nick. The Common Core is standards. It's not a teaching guide, so I am taking some liberties here to point out some things, and you saw 10 minutes, not a full classroom. So I just have 5 things I'd like to share that to me put this right in the center of Common Core mathematics. First is that the word problem is there. There's a lot of applications mentioned in the Common Core. Apply your knowledge, apply, apply, apply. And word problems traditionally were something that you'd maybe apply your skills to, at the end of a textbook page or something like that. But here the word problem serves a purpose of making sense of the math. The very fact, like Nick said, that it's a linear context, a mileage context, hints at a number line strategy. So the story itself is concrete and a good entry point. So having word problems at the center of the work is definitely a Common Core piece. The other thing I'd like to point out is math rigor. In the Common Core, we talk about, with subtraction specifically, it isn't just takeaway. So one takeaway from this task is that this was not a takeaway situation. You weren't starting with 309 and then taking away 280. You were looking at the difference between those two distances. And difference is a really important concept for subtraction that's been underdone in the curriculum. We've done so much takeaway. And I think when we wing story problems, they're oftentimes takeaway stories. And I've done that with thousands of teachers, so I say that with some assurance, that when we wing stories, they're takeaway stories. And this gives a chance to see a difference scenario. And in the Common Core, for example, in second grade, they explicitly say compare situations, compare, find the difference. Third, I think you see here the math practices that are stamped on every page of the Common Core and are that opportunity for students to reason quantitatively, to make sense of problems, to select a strategy, to notice the structure in numbers. So I think the Common Core, this is a nice illustration of the math practices in action. Not a separate thing that we do, but embedded in learning the content. Then fourth, and sort of something we'll talk about many times, I think, in the next hour, is strategies. You saw here the strategies that you might use. They're on the screen right now. And those strategies are a student's choice. And we see across the implementation in our survey some tensions around the strategies. And you can see how these strategies might be taught in the classroom, but ultimately it's not that students are memorizing, 5 different ways, but that they have this repertoire of strategies so they can pick an efficient way. This one, the numbers lent to that counting up strategy. I saw a lot of hands go up for the counting up strategy. Sometimes the standard algorithm will be more efficient. And that takes me to the final point, which is really at the heart of all Common Core, is that we need to raise a population of students who are fluent. Everyone agrees on fluency. There's no math wars around fluency. The issue is down in the weeds about what does fluency mean. And fluency means that you make a choice on what strategy you use based on the numbers in the problem. It is about efficiency. But the standard algorithm here is a way to the solution, but I think you can see that it wasn't necessarily the quickest way to the solution. So let's just take a Washington, D.C. metaphor here of computing and commuting. So you're making different decisions about how to get to work based on traffic flow and based on the situation. It's very situational. And that's also true with numbers and subtraction. The decisions that you make are based on the numbers in the problem. And so in this case, it was set up nicely for using a mental strategy, using a place value strategy, something like that. So that choice is at the heart of the Common Core. So I thought that Nick did a nice job of presenting it in that way. Solve it some way you like, and then helping to debrief the strategies so that students learn the repertoire of strategies.
All right, Jenny, you're up here. All right, awesome. So let me get the rest of the panel up here and introduce them as well. We're also going to be joined by Beth Kakuza. She is the director at Student Achievement Partners, which is a nonprofit organization founded by 3 of the lead writers of the Common Core standards. Student Achievement Partners helps districts and teachers all over the country implement the core and other rigorous standards in their classrooms. Beth is a former math teacher in the New Jersey Public Schools. She currently serves as president of her local school board, which lots of stories she has about that. And I'm also joined by Kathleen. She goes by Kate Lacadomo. She is frequent contributor to the Hechinger Report. She actually wrote a really nice piece about parents struggling to understand the Common Core and the expectations associated with it. She's written a lot about parents and other issues relative to, for example, one of her recent articles was out about preschool expansion in New York City. She teaches journalism at CUNY Graduate School of Journalism. She freelances for the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and other media outlets. And she previously covered education for the New York Daily News. So this is the panel, and I'm going to move myself over here and join the panel.
Reach up and grab my notes.
And she's going to grab her notes. And we're going to start off talking with a few questions. Really, I said at the beginning, we're going to talk about parents primarily, and then we're going to delve into a few other really interesting findings in the report. But the first one, and Andrew, if you can put this slide up, I've just got a few slides that I think are just nice context for what we're going to be talking about. But if you are familiar at all, read the report, but you don't have to, the big finding that sort of jumped out at many of us who, when we were working on it, was that 85% of teachers agreed that reinforcement of learning was declining at home because parents don't understand the way that math is being taught. That was a pretty big number. So I think one of the things we want to start off with and just kick it off, and Jenny, I'll start with you, is number one, why do we think teachers reported this about parents? And what do you think are the primary causes of this parental angst?
I think why they reported it is because I think it's it's happening everywhere. I think it's a problem everywhere that parents are wondering why homework looks different. And I think that teachers are reluctant to do things that will get a negative response from parents. So it's a high concern. And I think that parents are concerned because, for example, if you imagine this task we just did coming home and students were asked to solve it on a number line, the parent might not know, what does that even mean? Show it on the number line. And so I think that the instructions themselves can be confusing. And we all know our children, especially young children, even if they practice that very thing in school, when they come home and their parent says, let's do this on the student says, I don't know what that means. I have a son like that, so I know this is true. Yeah.
Who else wants to chime in on that one?
I guess I agree a lot with what Jenny just said, because being in the schools, and especially my role as a math specialist, that's what I was constantly getting from parents is, what is this? What are they doing? What are these strategies? How can I help? I think it all comes from parents wanting to help their kids, but not knowing how. So it was a lot of just explaining and using that angst of the parents not sure how to help because they so badly want to.
I would also just add that from my experience, I think a lot of the parental angst comes from a lack of information or too much misinformation. I know this isn't universally the case, but in my experience in dealings with other parents, I have yet to meet one who, when actually shown the standards, doesn't say, that sounds reasonable.
Right.
They're frustrated and upset about it, but when they actually look at the list of standards, they say, oh yeah, I do. That's what I want my kid to know. So parents don't always have access to that source document. So it's, a lot of their confusion is around just not having the facts and the information.
So, Kate, I'm actually going to ask you to piggyback on that because you've covered education for a long time. And I think sometimes what we hear, and this is kind of what Beth is saying, is sometimes anecdotally we hear that parents have concerns that aren't necessarily related to the standards, but other stuff. So what do you think these other concerns are, and how do you think they sort of intersect with the Common Core?
Well, I think sometimes when parents, I think one of the reasons, just for the first answer, that teachers are saying this is because parents are telling them, what does this mean? I don't really understand how to help them. And sometimes what they're hearing either from the teacher or in the media, on social media, is words like standards and Common Core and testing. And I feel like it all sort of gets mangled, and it's really hard for them to step away and say, well, I really just need to understand how this new math works. Or they may hear, well, they need to know this on the test. Well, now it becomes a question about testing, not really about the math that's in front of them. Or these are the Common Core standards. Well, there's so much anger about Common Core that it becomes Common Core, not this question. So I think that's how it gets. It becomes about other issues, not the literal problem that's in front of them.
I mean, there was this big joke, right, and again, I'm not on Twitter, but I heard it in the office where everybody was saying, like, thanks Common Core, right? People were blaming, like, everything under the sun, right, about Common Core, and I think we're still seeing some of that, right? I mean, it's not as bad as it was, but it's still happening. So let's deal with, the harder question, which is what should be done about it? And we can think about it both in terms of helping parents understand about some of the shifts that are occurring in classrooms, but also this PR problem too that we're surfacing here with Kate. So just, what, in a nutshell, what are some key things that you think we should be doing to help parents with this adjustment?
So I'll start. I think it all starts with clear communication, providing parents with information that is useful to them, and really establishing an environment in which parents can ask questions, can ask questions of the teacher, can really try to understand. My district did a series of articles in our district newsletters that was sort of explaining the standards, pointing parents to information that was written specifically for a parent audience. The National PTA has brochures that they've done that explain the grade level standards. The Council of Great City Schools has put out documents, parent guides, and then drawing a blank on who it was, the Great Schools did milestones videos, which are meant to illustrate the standards. And I think pointing parents to those resources that can help them really understand what the expectations are is helpful. And setting up an environment in which, once you've provided that information, parents can ask questions of teachers. I don't, raise those questions and try and start to understand what's going on in the classroom. I think most of this, like I said before, most of this angst comes from feeling like they don't have the information and something's happening to their child and they don't know why it's happening.
Good point. Anybody else on that one?
I can, again, just speaking from my experiences, also getting out in front too. Being the first one to make a communication of the parent, saying whether it's through a newsletter or a pamphlet or at a back to school night or having a math night for parents to come in and just learn about what their students will be doing at their specific grade levels too. And I think that's some of the misconceptions is their students going into a certain grade, but it's what they're hearing is from another grade level, and so there's still that angst over it. But just clear communication of what we're doing and how it's going to benefit their students.
I would just say two things that I agree with Beth, that communication between the parent, the teacher, and the school is really going to go a long way in helping them understand a lot of issues, a lot of changes happening in the classroom, and sort of getting used to that newness together. Also, it benefits schools to do math nights, bring the parents in, not pointing them to an app about standards, but showing them problems, showing them how they can solve them, what the expectations are, and making those meetings also accessible in terms of time and streaming them. I think that's helpful for parents as well, because sometimes I think these math nights are done and not the same parents come that probably aren't the ones who need the help the most. So, really making it as accessible to the parent as possible.
So let's get a little bit more specific. Let's say a child comes home with a homework assignment and the parent doesn't understand it, okay? Because this is what we hear a lot of. So what can a teacher do to head off a parental question or concern about homework?
Okay, and I'll go ahead and start with that. I think, again, like we just kind of mentioned in the previous question, contact the teacher. Ask them, what does this look like in the classroom? How did you approach it? Whether that's via phone call or an email or some means of communication. Even if it's just a note on the homework sheet. I've mentioned to many parents, that's fine. That's okay. Just write a note that says, wasn't sure how this was done in class. Can you provide an example? Can you send that home? So as teachers, as parents, we want them helping with the homework. We want them supporting, having that communication piece. So
you're saying send a worked example home.
Yes, exactly. Send a worked example home. I know in our district and a lot of districts around the world, interactive notebooks are really a good resource that we have our students bring home, where they have at least one or two worked examples of the strategies they're doing or the math they're doing in class. So that way, not only for the students, but for the parents, they can just open it up and see a worked example through a problem.
Yeah, I would say there's things that both teachers and parents can do with the homework, so these always cross over, because when we're talking about what we might do for the parents, we're really talking about things we're inviting teachers to do to help their parents. But I think the strategies Nick is sharing are important, as well as a homework assignment saying solve these subtraction problems using a strategy is a little more open and helpful to parents in saying, use this strategy that you might not know. I also think that there's a wealth of online resources from tutorials. You can just Google what you're looking for. If some teacher has sent home, the lattice method, and they're like, what's the lattice method? That can be found. I think having I've encouraged teachers to take a little card that says, here's questions to ask your child when they don't understand. And that can be something that's, copied on bright paper, laminated like a bookmark, and sits there at the table at home. And so when their child's struggling, they have these questions that help the child. I think having a first problem worked at school helps that child, number one, have success when they return to it later that night, but also helps the parents see that work. I've seen teachers do a fantastic job of videotaping themselves, explaining the very math they're doing at home, and then they make that accessible to their families. Their families can log in and watch them explain it again.
I think it's important. I think on the point of what teachers can do, it's important to recognize that not everything in the Common Core will look different to parents. There is stuff in the Common Core that will look like what they did when they were, there are different things, but there are also things that will look familiar to them. And so I think as a teacher, to really think strategically about what things go home for homework. Not everything that you do in the classroom has to then have an equivalent homework assignment. There are things that parents will be very empowered and comfortable helping their children with. So I think there's also some strategizing over what the homework assignments are that are going home. And then I would just say, myself as a parent, there are times when my kids come home and I don't know how to help them with their homework. It doesn't just happen in math either. And I see my role as a parent to be the one who asks questions. I sit down and I say, well, what did you do in class? How did you approach the problem? Did you do something like this? And it often comes a time when I can't get any farther. And so I say, sorry, buddy, I can't help you anymore. Do you want me to write a note and say what we did? You're going to have to talk to your teacher about it tomorrow. So I think, asking questions and trying to get as far as you can and being honest that sometimes you're not going to be able to help with everything and get to those right answers and being comfortable with that.
One of the things I found when we wrote the piece, and just to give a little background, when we wrote the piece, the idea was, we know there's a lot of feelings about Common Core. Let's do a service piece on how parents can help with homework. And one of the things that stuck out to me was just sort of staying calm and not thinking, I don't understand either. Just staying calm, asking questions, being there for the child and not feeling like they have to be super parent, that it really is just, not just, but really trying to figure out, do they really not understand this and need to get extra help, and how am I going to get them this extra help? Are they really just tired and telling me they don't understand it? What do they understand and what don't they understand? So I think that's really important for parents with the math homework. And I say the math because that seems to have become one of the biggest issues for parents. And yeah, just letting go a little. And if it really is, an issue and they aren't able to help, trying to find someone who is, instead of criticizing the homework, trying to relearn something. You do the best you can, and you get them the help that they need.
So, and this is just one of the standards, right? Says that students should know from memory their addition and multiplication facts by the end of grade 3. Okay? And one thing we've heard is one thing that parents can do to help their kids with these math facts is use flashcards or apps or these type of things at home. So I guess one question is this something that you think our teachers are actually recommending that parents do at home? I remember I actually wrote a piece with Jason Zumba in our Education Gadfly this today that was a little bit about memorizing, because I think there's a lot of confusion around that. But anyway, one thing I remember reflecting on is my dad would quiz me, so to speak, on my times tables as a kid, 6 times 6, 8 times 8, and I got great pride out of eventually learning them that way. So I don't know if that's old school or whether that's still going on, but I guess if you guys could speak a little bit about, is that something to recommend parents do at home to help? And are there other things that are just sort of easy things that we can help them, ask them to help with their kids at home, especially in the elementary grades?
I'll start with that because I think that goes along with what I just said about not everything's changed. That is absolutely something that parents can help with, and it's something that will be familiar to parents because it's something that they likely had to do, like your recollection of your childhood. I think it's important to note that that doesn't mean parents are expected to teach multiplication. Like that entire topic now is something that you're asking parents to teach. There's a lot of conceptual development and work that's going on in the classroom that helps build that understanding, but the actual practicing of the memorization of facts and the automaticity with the recall of those products is definitely something parents can help with. And parents can help to build understanding if they see that if their student is lacking in some understanding, they can work with them. So I'm not saying that they can't help with that, but that it shouldn't be equated to now we're just going to expect parents to teach multiplication and we're going to do the other stuff.
I absolutely agree. I think fluency is critical, and so fluency starts with the basic facts, and we have to have what I would call automaticity, being able to do those facts quickly, or any other. I'll just focus on addition and subtraction. If you don't know your addition and subtraction facts within 20, you're going to really be bogged down when you get to bigger numbers. I also think we can help parents see that there are other ways beyond memorizing to help their child. So if their child's struggling with sums that land in the teens, then how might they help? Well, the Make 10 strategy is one that's being encouraged in the Common Core, and it's a great strategy because it's based on number sense, and you can build on that, and that can help a child who's not a good memorizer learn 8 plus 6 by just sort of moving 2 over and thinking 10 plus 4. Quite honestly, many bright people have done that informally all along. And so if we just invite parents to share strategies, how do you add? And I can add 8 plus 6 in my head by moving those over. I've done it for many years. In half a second. I consider myself automatic. I don't know that I ever memorized that fact because for me, I just worry I'm going to get it wrong if I don't do a Make 10. Just a little personal side. But I think that we want to open up those strategies so that students feel like they can come up with the fact, they can get that to the automaticity, but invite parents to help them. Are they struggling with some facts? Here's some strategies that might help them. And those have payoffs, number sense-wise, down the road.
And I think other things like Beth has said, to do at home is talk. Just ask math-related questions. Okay, I'm going to the store. Something costs $7. I'm going to give them a 20. How much is left? How much am I going to get back? Just relating that math to the real world, just bringing the math alive, I think is one thing that parents can absolutely do, and a lot do naturally, but just really encouraging that talk about math at home.
I guess just stay on this topic just for another minute or so, and then we'll branch out to some other things that are interesting in the report that were raised. But I think if you guys can come up with any solid examples of teachers or districts that have really hit it out of the park on communicating with parents, or districts that haven't. I know we've got a slide up here, Jenny, you've actually written about this extensively, about what things a teacher might say and then what things a parent might hear. So when we get it right and when we don't get it right in communicating with parents. So examples of either one of those.
Yeah, well, I'll start since you put that slide up. But I think two-way communication is really critical. We say things. I went to my district's Welcome to the Common Core meeting where we were told all things will be different. It's going to be much harder now. And I'm thinking, I'm just watching all the other parents to, kind of see when the panic's going to break out. But to make sure that what we're trying to say is what we're saying. So, we've had such a battle over fluency historically because I think we don't really understand it. So to be sure that parents are seeing the why of what we're doing. Why do we have more than just the standard algorithm? Well, because it gives us access to multiple strategies, more efficient strategies when it makes sense. And so if they have that why, then you're not just saying, we're going to be learning lots of ways to do multiplication. And I think that's a big piece of doing that. So I think we have to really hear our message and think about what is it the parent wants. I want to go back to what Nick said. The parent wants their child to be successful. So the why is a big piece, and thinking about what resonates with them. It might not resonate that we're trying to keep up with other countries in the world, but it might really resonate that this kind of numeracy and number sense is really important in the 21st century for the careers that are available to them. Or just thinking of the messaging for parents is really important.
Oh no, you guys are this light on real examples? Come on.
I mean, I have found it in New York City, the schools that have traditionally done well at communicating with parents have done fairly well at communicating the new math or the Common Core math to parents. And one way they've been successful is talking a little bit more about the broader picture. This is what we're really trying to do, not politicizing it. And there was a third thing I was going to say, not talking about that this is what the chancellor wants us to do, or this is what the governor wants us to do, and this is what's going to be on the test, but really just taking the time to talk to parents to explain it. And the schools that have not done well are the schools that have not done well at communicating with parents for many legitimate reasons. Those are often the ones that are under the most pressure to get the test scores up, to get the children are coming in behind. So they have so many issues that they're trying to deal with that asking them, we'll just have a math night, as simple as it sounds, I think can be quite challenging for some schools. So that, without pointing out specific examples, seems to be happening in New York.
I'll share two favorites. One, because there's been research that it improved the students' learning, and that is this sort of unit preview. So at the school level, they brought families in, fed them, so it's a high poverty district, but gave them a meal, and then just had sort of this dine and discuss opportunity. And so as they did that, they were showing whatever they knew might be unfamiliar to families and giving some rationale and why, but the purpose was to help parents help their child with the homework, and it was hugely successful and overcame some barriers with families that are reluctant to show up at school because their own experiences were not very happy ones. So that's one of my favorites. And then teachers who have these great personal websites for their grade and their person, so you can just link on here. There's this open dialogue going back and forth, and their tutorials. I think that's gone a long way. The one-on-one conversations with parents, but then also the communication in terms of the content is also another one that's been very effective.
And I want to piggyback on what Jenny was just saying. I think the linking to the websites is a great idea, and it's been a couple of really good ones that were brought up earlier. Great schools. Their milestone videos are wonderful. Another, when I was actually in the classroom and just starting to transition, one of the ones that I went to constantly, not only for my own professional growth, but to help teachers, was LearnZillion. They have free resources out there for videos that help break down the standards for pretty much every content standard that a parent is going to come across. So just highlighting those. In the school I was at, we, instead of just doing a math night, we actually did a bring your parent to math class the last couple of years that we found highly successful and parents absolutely loved, because they actually got to come in, and instead of just sitting in the background, we had planned lessons each grade level for them to specifically engage in some sort of Common Core lesson and with their child at the same time. And a lot of times there was a takeaway that the parents could take then home and play a game or do some other activity with them that they'd done in the classroom, and we found that very successful. Other districts have done a really good job posting their own videos of what this looks like or what it could look like, or making handouts, making pamphlets that are available on their websites. So.
I just want to point out something. I hope it's not too controversial with my fellow panelists, but I think we keep using this term new math. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say that the Common Core is not new math. It's the same math. Math is math. The Common Core is, lists the expectations for the progression of learning across grade levels, but it's math. So I think sometimes in terms of communication with parents, When we say things like new math, then they think, well, what's wrong with the old math? Why are we doing new math? Who needed different math? The math was fine before. And that is uncomfortable. So I think we need to be careful using that term because it's not new math, it's just math.
Good, good. All right, we can come back to this in the Q&A. I want to follow up and get your questions on the parent angle. But want to spend a little bit of time talking about some other just sort of interesting findings in the research and get some feedback on it. And one is just, again, this idea of multiple methods. I think that we saw some interesting data in the report about that. And let me just read this for a second, because some people are like, where does this come from, this multiple methods stuff? So we spent, we kind of, okay, let's go back to the standards, let's go back to the mathematical practices and kind of really look at it. And so in the mathematical practices, there's this requirement that students check their answers to problems using a different method. Okay, that's one thing. And then the key shifts on the Common Core website then says students must be able to access concepts from a number of perspectives in order to see math as more than a set of mnemonics or discrete procedures. So then we go to the survey and we see, lo and behold, 65% of K-5 teachers in our survey report that they are teaching multiple methods to solve a problem. So I'm like, did they know that that was in the standards? Did they just latch onto that? Is that what the standards intended? So I want to ask you first about, is that what the standards meant, or is this being interpreted accurately? But at the same time, then you look on another survey finding and you see, and we've got it on the screen here, 53% of teachers also agree, quote, that students are frustrated because they're being asked to learn many different ways to solve the same problem. So teachers are saying we're doing it, and then they're also reporting, oh, by the way, our kids are really frustrated about this. So is this just, do the teachers have this right? Is it a possibility that we could be doing more harm than good by teaching multiple methods? So let me open that can of worms. Who wants to start?
So I'll kick it off. This shift in the Common Core is really about allowing all students the opportunity to learn mathematics. And so, I believe that the shift is what's going to take us from a world in which we have math people and non-math people to a world in which everybody can learn math. I think, being able to, some of these other strategies are what uncover the mathematics behind a problem and will allow students to see that. But that said, I have seen this play out in a way that can be frustrating for students. I want to point out that in the standards, when EG is used, it means, for example, it doesn't mean be good at every single one of these strategies. And so I think if that list is being interpreted as I must teach my students to all be able to do every one of these methods, then that could get frustrating. So I think, I definitely think there's a balance to be found that you want to, teach students to access the mathematics, and, one of those strategies could be the aha moment for that one student or a handful of students, and so you want to give them that opportunity, but at the same time, we don't need to treat the strategies listed in the standards as requirements for every student for every problem.
Anybody else?
I think that's really good points. When you have multiple strategies, students can choose one that makes sense to them, and so it does open up mathematics to more learners. And I agree, like I was thinking about, the good, the bad, and the ugly of the multiple strategies, right? Because on one hand, you have where students are rotely learning more strategies, but they're still just rotely memorizing, do this step, and then do this step, and then do this step, and that's exasperating what we're trying to move away from. So I want to go back to the fluency piece where the teachers need to understand, parents need to understand that the reason we're learning multiple strategies is that then given the numbers in the situation, you have choices. And you can choose, like with the subtraction problem, to choose the standard algorithm or to choose, in the case of the adding up, counting up, a more direct strategy for that problem. So I think that's key. I also think that when it says solve problems in multiple ways, it doesn't mean here's a math problem, let's solve it 3 different ways. That happens, but the point is that because the numbers are different in different stories, or they're set up differently, or the context is different, that this strategy might work best for this problem, and this strategy might work for this problem. And so we want to have these fluent students that can say, oh yeah, for this one I'm going to do a graph, or for this one I'm going to do a bar diagram. for some of the middle school strategies. And I think that decision-making and choice is not explicit, but that's the point of having these multiple strategies, not just to have them memorized. And the EG is a great point, because they are examples, and some of them have gotten almost too much airtime. And then there's other strategies not on the EG that are great strategies, and they're not getting the attention.
One of the things that I found when I was researching my story, was one of the experts said, well, yeah, it is hard. So I don't necessarily think that students being frustrated has to be viewed as, of course they're frustrated, they're 10 years old, they want to be told what the answer is. They don't want to be told, here's 5 different ways, figure out the easiest, the best way to do it. That may serve them better in the long run, and we can tell them that, but it's really frustrating for a middle school child or any child or adult to understand that. So I don't know, I don't think the goal of it is frustration, but I do think it's going to be sort of a natural part of being asked to do more.
Well, it sounds like it's possible, right, for a teacher to kind of go back by the book, right, and feel like, oh, I got to teach these 5 ways, because maybe that's what they're seeing in the standards and they're rule followers, right, or something like that. And it sounds like what we're really saying, it's supposed to be more of a flexible approach to empowering them to learn math in ways that sort of fit the context of the problem they're trying to solve. But it seems like some teachers are kind of approaching it very, regimented, like you got to learn these ways, instead of really trying to customize the way that suits the problem. Is that right?
I think a little bit of that happens. So with if you read the one that Nick had up earlier, it says use place value strategies or properties. Well, then there's a lot of different interpretations of what those mean. So that, for example, multiplication, that's where the lattice method came from. The lattice method's not in the Common Core, but you're seeing a lot of lattice method taught but it isn't called out as a specific strategy.
And I was just going to chime in too with this, Russia, is the way the teachers are presenting it. To me, it's about exposure and having those students find that one strategy that works best for them in a certain situation, as opposed to saying, I need to know every single strategy. And I think that's probably where the frustration is coming from. And that's what I've seen in buildings too, is, well, they need to know this one, they need to know this one. Well, no, they need to know how to add, they need to know how to subtract in a way that makes sense to them, or multiply or divide in a way that makes sense to them.
With an eye on efficiency and accuracy and flexibility, right? So that's the goal, not to know 5 strategies, but to be able to efficiently solve problems accurately.
On that note, I want to, given that our topic or theme for the day is parents, from a parent perspective, I would offer this advice on strategies, which is be patient initially with strategies that seem inefficient, because there's probably a reason the teacher is doing that strategy to develop some understanding. So I know I've heard a lot of parents who say, what is this, breaking apart into place value? It'd be so much easier if they just teach them the steps. At the same time, be wary if those inefficient strategies are lingering for a really long time, and then have a conversation with the teacher or the curriculum director about what's the plan to get them to a more efficient place. Don't expect that to happen immediately. Be patient with some of these different things that you maybe haven't seen before, and there's a quicker way to get the answer, but still expect there to be a pathway to getting the quicker answer.
Absolutely.
All right, another interesting finding. So we found that teachers with students who were below grade level have a more negative view of the impact of the standards. So you see a slide up here for those of you who are in the audience. I guess I want to say, is this to be expected, that teachers who are teaching kids below grade level might feel more negatively about the impact of the standards on their kids? And also, do you guys have examples of how to handle the teaching of these more rigorous standards with students who are already below grade level?
So it's been my world for the last 3 years as an interventionist, so I'll go ahead and start. I do think there is that to be expected, because of some of the misconceptions and stuff that gets tied in with Common Core that we mentioned earlier. Is those teachers are feeling a pressure to have their students succeed, not only because we want our kids to do well, but because of assessment pressures as well. So they feel, well, these students aren't going to do well on the test, and that may end up having a negative effect on me in some way. And so really it's about educating the teachers and the parents of how can we help these students make progress. They're on a progression of learning. They might not be to the grade level yet, but they're on their way there, and finding out where they're at that moment. And it's an ongoing process. So helping teachers know how to diagnose where a student is, what strategies are they using, and how do we get them to the next point so they can see a success, so they can see growth.
I would just say I agree, this is absolutely to be expected. We're setting the bar for college and career readiness, and we have not yet held our students and ourselves to that bar. So that is to be expected, that there's going to be some, we're going to be behind in some areas, and we're going to, teachers are going to feel the pressure to try and get their students to make those strides. Teachers that I have worked with have found, who face this problem, have found the focus of the standards to be their friend, to once they relieve themselves of the obligation that if I have a third grader who's, behind grade level, that means I have to teach first grade, second grade, third grade, all of the standards. No, you need to look at the third grade standards and look at what's most important for those third graders. And then in the context of that third grade work, look back at the things that are missing and bring them up. And it's not, I paint a rosy picture that it's so easy to do. It's not easy to do. It's very difficult. It'll take a couple years for kids to catch up. But giving teachers the freedom to focus significantly on what's most important for the pathway that their students are on, I think is really the most important thing for those teachers who are working with students who are far below grade level.
I think as teachers become more confident with math, and this addresses also the sort of the idea of teachers feeling like they have to teach every type of way of solving a math question. I think as they get more professional development, that they will be better able to service their students, whether they're high performers or low performers, and that the students who are struggling, those teachers may just need more time and more professional development to figure out how to best serve those students, because one method isn't going to help for all of them.
I think that's a great point that our survey actually speaks to, because the teachers, the longer they've been teaching the Common Core, the more strategies that they were trying, the more things they were doing. They're also getting students that have been living in the Common Core, and so that really helps. And they start to see, oh, this strategy was really critical. I don't really need to teach this strategy over here. I see it wasn't really as important. And over time, we also found that teachers are talking a lot with their grade level colleagues, but they haven't spent as much time with the grades before or after, which really helps with these struggling learners to figure out what did they learn the year before, what might they have learned, and what might they learn going forward. So that those vertical discussions are important for the struggling student as well.
I feel like that's a common theme, and we say that in the report, right, that we aren't having these across-grade conversations. You see in the data, teachers talk to the teachers in their grade, but they don't talk to the teachers above or below their grade. And if we know that math just builds on each other, it builds on each other in a way even that ELA doesn't, right? I mean, it's very sort of consecutive and sequential. Then I just don't understand why we're still hearing that teachers aren't talking to teachers in other grades. I mean, it just seems kind of ridiculous. I mean, are there any, again, I'll ask for real districts that are doing this, are there any out there where you actually see teachers communicating across grades, or is it just still much within your own grade?
I work with a number of districts, and of course the first priority was let's get all the third grade teachers together and let's really focus on what's our third grade stuff, right? And that was a great model that really worked well. But now it's sort of like, oh, all right, so the third grade teachers are inheriting students who have done stuff that they're not necessarily as familiar with. So a district in Kentucky recently did this really nice revisiting of the introductory pages to the Common Core, the big ideas, and they actually mapped the textbook that they have and the stuff they've been doing, their timelines, now that they've been doing it for a number of years, to that. And then they studied the grades before them and the grades after them, and they were blown away that they weren't spending the right amount of time in their minds. There's no right, but in their minds, they were spending too much time on this and not enough time on that based on this bigger picture. So over time, you sort of get certain things worked out, and then you can sort of pull out to look, I think, more vertically. And that's what I really think our country will benefit from, is having those continued conversations around vertical alignment.
It's also just critical to know what students are going to be expected to do at the next step, because it gives a bigger picture to what you're expecting them to do at this step. And I think, I've seen when teachers across grade levels get together and really, we've developed this coherence card activity where they have to see how, sort the standards and see how they develop over time. And when they do that, they really then realize, like, oh, I was spending time on this. It's actually a fourth grade standard. I actually don't need to. I can make room for these other things that I'm trying to do. So it's, I think logistically it's difficult where the schools that I've worked with and talked to, it's hard to find time in the structure of the school day and the school year to get teachers across grade levels to work together. So I think that's a problem that has to be solved in order for teachers to be able to articulate across grade levels.
One thing I've heard anecdotally, and I agree that practically it is, teachers are juggling a lot and it's hard, and they're not teaching one subject, so even when they're talking to other teachers, there's limited time. But I have heard more that high schools, middle schools, and elementary schools are talking to each other a little bit more about what the math expectations are, that they should come into high school being able to do A, B, and C, and same thing with middle school. So, hopefully that will be helpful.
All right, we're going to do one more question from me, so you guys be thinking about your questions out there and in Twitter land. So one other thing I want to talk about is this idea of the middle school level. We saw again in our research that elementary teachers tended to have a more positive view of the potential benefits of the standards, short and long term, on their kids. And we thought that was interesting because, frankly, a lot of the anecdotal stuff you hear out there is that, a lot of people think the standards are developmentally inappropriate at the early grades. But when you look at least the data we had, it wasn't the elementary teachers thinking these were developmentally inappropriate. It was the middle school teachers who really seemed to be hitting a wall. And again, we have a little slide on this, but again and again, it was sort of a pattern in the survey where we'd see these middle school teachers would show more concern than the teachers in K2 over their students' math abilities in particular. So Jenny and the other co-authors on the report spent a lot of time talking about, okay, what could be going on at middle school? And one idea was, okay, well, maybe the middle school standards are just harder, right, than the elementary school. That's sort of like, top of the head answer. And then there's this idea that, okay, well, they actually had to transition into these standards where the K2 teachers started with them. So I guess let's talk for a few minutes about what could be going on with kids or teachers at that middle school level. Why do they seem to be hitting a wall there?
Well, I've written about it, so I'll let somebody else start if you want to.
Or we can say, what are we going to do about it, too?
I think middle school is just hard on so many levels. Socially, those children are going through so much, and they are learning, more sophisticated math, and that is, very challenging for some of them. They're learning how to just be organized human beings. So I think middle school teachers are probably just more frustrated than elementary school teachers for a lot of reasons.
I have a funny answer and a serious answer. So I was a middle school and high school math teacher, so I'm allowed to say this. I think teachers just generally get grumpier as you go up in grades. You talk about any topic, the elementary school teachers are happy, and middle school teachers are a little more grumpy, and high school, forget it. But seriously, I think the things that you mentioned are true. I think, you have transition-wise, you have students who have not been through the, new trajectory of learning, and so they're coming into this sort of cold, so to speak. But you also, if you look at how the Common Core changed what we expect at grade levels. I think you could say that in the elementary grades, we really focused on, so things sort of got smaller, the amount of content that teachers were expected to cover. So that's a welcome relief, right? Because now you have more time and you can get really deeply into things. That also happened at the middle school, but I think you also see some shifts in grade level expectations, where now some of the content in middle school used to be thought of as high school content. And so now it's like creeping its way into the middle school. If you look at the 8th grade standards, it's a lot of what we used to just call algebra. So I think there's a shift in that way, where in elementary school is more, I really get to focus on these things. And in middle school now we have some more complicated, some more nuanced, maybe some content that wasn't even taught previously. So that could be, and that's just a sort of off the cuff, but that could be some of what's going on, I think.
If you think of the content shifts as elementary's been cleared out for the number strand, fractions have migrated down. That used to be where middle school teachers took a lot of time. Now a lot of that's already, they have to have the fluency in middle school, but they're not necessarily teaching it. And instead they're teaching, they're picking up and doing all of the statistics and probability that used to be across grades, and now it's at a higher level of rigor and all, in the middle school. So really ramped up there, and the algebraic thinking is definitely more rigorous. And so forth and so on. So there is definitely more change in the Common Core in the middle grades than there probably is at the elementary grades. And then the other reasons we've already shared, I think, is part of that.
Nick, anything on that?
There's one part was what can be done about it. I think as we're talking is having those elementary, especially those 5th grade teachers, talking with the 6th grade teachers that they could possibly be working with, and having specialists, if there are any, talking to each other and collaborating, just to give the middle school, this is what they should be coming with, this is where they've been. And so being able to take it, and that may help, seeing as the elementary seem to have a more positive view of implementing the standards.
So maybe it's going to work itself out, right? If it's a transition issue, I mean, that's sort of the glass half full, right? That, that eventually you're not going to have this transition anymore. Everybody's going to be, of course, the kids who started are just going to, keep going up in grades. So
teachers reported, middle school teachers reported, that they would learn more content teaching from the Common Core. It's one of the questions we asked them, and that's what you're seeing is now they're figuring out, oh, there are all these ways to teach ratios. I get this linear thing, and so as they're learning that content that they haven't had to know or know it at the level to teach it, they're now getting more depth of knowledge to do that better.
yeah. We don't have a slide for that, but it's interesting, right, that they're actually reporting that the Common Core, teaching it, is improving their own content knowledge. And we've seen other reports where teachers themselves will admit that their teacher preparation, particularly in mathematics, wasn't all that strong. So, in some ways, and I know you guys are doing all the hard work, right? You're doing the heavy lifting of working with these teachers and really trying to, get them up to speed. I'm guessing that sometimes you're actually teaching them the content. Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah, okay, all right. Okay, I think it's question time from you guys. Anybody, I see some hands, and Andrew's gonna come by with a mic. And if you could, number one, introduce yourself, and number two, make sure it's a question and not too much commentary. Not that anybody does that around DC, but anyway. Andrew, you going back here? I see 2 hands right here.
Good afternoon. My name is Patrick Lenahan. I'm from George Mason University, and this is a great panel. I like everything you've said in there. But there's one thing that I didn't hear anybody mention, and I'll tie it back to what you said when you talked about the students being below grade level and how do teachers handle that. And you talked about the vertical discussions that are needed. What's the role of the principal in this?
I'll start. That's a great question. I mean, absolutely, administrators. I wish we would have said that, because when you talk about, when you asked, what schools are doing this well, administrators are at the core of this, right? Prioritizing these parent nights, helping their teachers, designing professional development. You know, at elementary school, we're always biting for time with all the reading and literacy stuff. So the principal that says, wow, we need more than just a half-a-day workshop at the beginning of the school year on math is having a huge, I mean, you laughed, right? But that's very common. And so that prioritizing of we need time to study the math, do the math, and not even just a traditional workshop model, but we need study time. We need to study the stuff that we're teaching, read about the strategies, understand why, you know, how we might sequence these things and that sort of thing. So the administrators are absolutely central, and it can't just be that they're supportive. That's one of my phrases I hear, oh yeah, my administrator is supportive. Like just because they're like, yes, I like the Common Core isn't enough. They have to be totally invested in moving the work forward.
They also have to know enough about the content to know what they're looking for when they walk into a classroom. I think I hear a lot of teachers who are extremely frustrated because they learn about the standards, they know about the standards, and they know what they need to do with their kids, but then they're fearful that when their principal walks in to observe them, they're going to be doing what they're supposed to be doing, but their principal is going to not think they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. So I think principal buy-in and, you know, understanding the content and the expectations, and then just to address the structural issues about cross-team articulation, you know, that's really the principal's role to set up those structures so that they can have those conversations.
I was going to say a lot of what Jenny and Beth said. It's you can be supportive, but actually showing that support, I think, is big from the principal and being able to understand what the teachers are doing.
Good. Saw another hand in the back.
Hi there, I'm Paul Statz. I work with Rheingold. We're a social impact agency. A number of our clients are working to promote the Common Core and some of the things that we're talking about today at the panel. And Patrick actually kind of not stole, but got to some of my question. And so what I'm wondering is how are teachers really engaging parents in the classroom about the Common Core? So I think the EdNext, there's an EdNext survey that came out last year that showed a disparity between kind of sentiments around college and career ready standards and then the Common Core. And so I kind of wonder like how especially for you, Nicholas, like hear from you about like how do you see other educators in the classroom doing this? Are they doing it? Are there things that other educators like everyone, you know, like folks here in the room can do to help promote or encourage other educators to be doing this type of outreach? Because there is a lot of frustration and kind of lack of understanding around the Common Core still.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying. And like I said, sending home newsletters, which we've traditionally done, but maybe there's a specific math newsletter that teachers can send home, or if there's a math person in the building coordinating something with them, being aware of what might be frustrating for parents and heading it off before it goes home. A lot of what was said, maybe sending home one, a couple of teachers in the building I was in, they would do the first problem of homework in class. And then, so that way the parents had something to see, and I think that was brought up of having that worked example is really important. And just trying to think of what else to say. Being engaging and just having an open line of communication and not taking it as to heart on their teaching style or their teaching approach, but it's just helping the parents become more knowledgeable, whether it's through sending them to a website, whether it's theirs, their district site, a site like LearnZillion, or a site like Milestones, or a site like, what's the other one I'm blanking on? But I think that's, and if anybody else wants to
The
chime
only
in
other
too.
thing I would add is my district started this thing in the elementary math classes, and I think it's called Math Explorations. And 4 times a year, they invite parents in to run centers. And I, of course, always volunteer for this opportunity. It's the one time I love to go into the classroom. But parents, you know, you don't have to be comfortable with math to do that. And it's a great opportunity for parents to just see what kids are doing in the classroom, how they're engaging with math. You know, it's really fascinating to watch kids engage with a mathematical problem and work together collaboratively, so they can really, parents can really see how it's all unfolding in the classroom, as opposed to just being sort of this behind the curtain something's going on and I'm not sure what it is. So having that sort of, welcoming environment and structure, you obviously don't want to set up a structure where you say, any day you want to, come in and check it out, would be a little bit disruptive. But having something organized like that, I think has been really helpful to just allow parents a little eye into what's going on in the classroom.
What I have seen in the last decade or two as an education reporter is that the principals have been more comfortable about having parents come in to the classroom, and schools, teachers are inviting those parents in. And I think that's a really important thing, because that's when parents can see how, the bigger picture, how things are working. That's when they can talk to the teacher without scheduling a meeting, maybe just bring something up in passing. And then to the point you asked earlier about sort of just leadership in general, I think a principal that is good at listening to parents and teachers has teachers that aren't afraid to say to her, I don't want to understand this, and I really need some help figuring out how to teach it. I think sometimes principals don't know that teachers are struggling until they see the students are struggling. And it's really important to have a leader where the teachers feel comfortable having that conversation with the principal.
Well, a couple of you guys have mentioned milestones in great schools. Can one of you guys explain what that is? Because I've heard a lot about that milestones thing, and exactly what is it doing? Not that I'm trying to do a plug for great schools, but I just heard a lot about it.
So the milestones videos are a set of videos at each grade level, K through 8, and I believe they have high school videos now posted, which are intended to show students interacting with mathematics at a representative of the Common Core. And so there are 3 videos at each grade level showing sort of a variety of, the videos intend to show some procedural math, some application, some conceptual math at each grade level. And just to see a student, at that grade level engaging with mathematics. It's a one-on-one teacher-student sort of tutorial setup, but you can see them work through the problems. There's a little bit of voiceover and annotation about what the mathematics is that they're working on.
The parent is supposed to watch this and say, this is what my kid is supposed to be learning in grade 3, and maybe I can do some of this at home now that I've seen somebody do it on
It's
this video.
It's sort of just a glimpse at the expectations of the standards at each grade level.
Question up here? Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is John, and I'm actually a former math teacher who taught geometry at the high school level and used the Common Core standards, and I'm currently a research fellow at the National Council on Teacher Quality. So as someone who went under the old standard, or kind of old math, and taught that way and then went over to Common Core, I'm interested in your thoughts on kind of the next generation of teachers who are, like me, likely did not come up under Common Core. So I'm wondering, it's kind of a 2-part question, to answer whichever one you want to. So do you have any advice generally for teacher preparation programs about any adjustments you think that they should be making to their programs to help train especially math teachers for Common Core? Or alternately, if you've seen any successful programs that are doing some great things around Common Core, would you mind sharing some stories about those?
Well, I do teacher preparation. I'm currently writing standards for the preparation of math teachers through AMTE. So that's a great question. And I think, these standards are the math. So the math might shift grades or whatever, but the critical thing is the same it's always been. Math teachers have to know their math, whether they're kindergarten, 5th grade, 8th grade. I think that what's happened is, as we're looking at how do you prepare a middle school teacher, we're looking at more algebra preparation than might have been the case, 10 or 15 years ago. We have a lot of advocacy to do in states with how they certify teachers. So while they could come through a university 4-year program and get all that content, we have a lot of middle school teachers who are getting certified through various routes where they're not going through those programs. So it's a very complicated challenge. I also really like our movement towards more math specialists. You just heard the need for professional development, professional growth, and just how do you disseminate this stuff and how do you support. And so, Nick is moving into a role, has migrated into a role where he's doing that. Well, then he's able to make change at the whole school level. So that teacher in 2nd grade that has I don't exactly know what this thing means, has somebody on board that can help with that. So I certainly think we also think about teacher preparation in terms of math specialist K-12, because that would really help us at the beginning.
I would just reiterate, I think content knowledge is the biggest piece, and all the work that we do with teachers and districts and, really at every level, you can do a bunch of good work, but if the teacher who's in the classroom, who's faced with doing this, teaching this math, doesn't have the content knowledge, you kind of hit a roadblock. So I think, to see more content go into teacher prep programs, I think of my own teacher prep program and the one math methods class that I had and like a half credit other class on math. And, it's certainly, if I hadn't been a math person who already brought with me math content knowledge, I would not have been prepared in any way to teach the expectations of these standards. And isn't it great that we have a common set of standards that we can train all teachers, no matter what school you go to, no matter what state you plan on teaching in? That's not a situation that we've been in before, where there's a consistent set of expectations that we can prepare teachers to teach. So I think we're in a good place to make those changes. Absolutely.
Is there, I keep pushing you guys to name names, is there a district, a college that seems to be ahead of the curve in terms of getting, you guys are laughing, it's just terrible when you laugh at the question, right? Like, it's maddening. Really nobody's quite there yet, no?
All I can say is that we, as an organization, are just starting to get into work with teacher prep, so I don't have names for you. I hope that soon there will be names to share.
We're all coming to you, Jenny.
Yeah. University of Louisville. Exactly. Send all your teachers there.
All right, another question, one right here.
Hi, I'm Ken Crable from the National Council of Teachers in Mathematics. One of your key findings referred to the math wars. Jenny mentioned automaticity. Question for Jenny and Beth and Nick, all three. There's sometimes set up this kind of false dichotomy of basic skills or conceptual understanding. And one of the things that's embedded in the Common Core is, as Jenny explained, procedural fluency and conceptual understanding. I wonder if all three of you could talk about how that runs through the Common Core and how that's understood, misunderstood, and being received and perceived by parents.
I'll start. The fluency, by the way, is listed with 4 things, and it's the introduction part of the math practices, and it is the accuracy and efficiency that we've always thought about, and then appropriate strategy selection and flexibility. And that is the package that's fluency. And fluency is one of those things, just like with language fluency, you know it when you see it, right? Because that person has access to multiple ways to do something, and they pick a good way, and they're going to get it correct. So that's the goal. So in the Common Core, that's why at various places it says using strategies, using place value strategies. Here's all the ways you could do ratios. Here's the different ways you could compare fractions. Here's the different ways you could do, get the answer to basic facts. And so, but what happens is they're listing the ways, but the fluency statement's way over on the math practice page, way back, on page 3 of the standard. So understanding that all those strategies are towards fluency, towards having that flexibility. Students who are flexible in solving problems do better. They do better on ACT or SAT because they're picking an efficient way to go about doing that work. And they're confident and competent in doing that. So automaticity is a piece of that. Automaticity would mean that you have an efficient strategy, and the automaticity specific to basic facts is that, within 3 seconds, or I don't know whoever came up with the number of seconds, but for the addition facts and the multiplication facts. So I think that automaticity is absolutely important for everyone. When you get to multiplication and multi-digit multiplication, to how you solve proportions and things like that, it's about having this range of strategies so that when you look at the situation, see the numbers, you pick an efficient strategy because you have that repertoire, and you get to a correct answer.
I would just say, you go to the page of the black and white, the print on the page, in each set of grade level standards, there are clearly articulated standards that require procedural skill and fluency. There are standards that require conceptual understanding, and there are standards that require application of those ideas in word problem, real world mathematical situations. So that, and I think when you say the math wars are over, it used to be that you would argue that only one of those things was important, or we're only going to teach this, the other things will happen. The Common Core has distinct expectations for all three of them. They could be dealt with separately. They could be dealt with together. Sometimes they are together. Sometimes you need to pay particular attention to one on its own. But there is no question that all three are required by each grade level.
And I think from the school perspective, and especially like a role like a math specialist and a classroom teacher, is how do all of those tie together? When do I need to be building conceptual understanding of basic facts early in the curriculum, as opposed to when should students have that fluency piece? And does my standard call for fluency, or does it call for conceptual understanding, or does it call for application? And what does that look like? I think it's important for teachers to feel comfortable embedding that into their instruction to help students decide what strategy is flexible for me, and again about exposure, exposing different strategies to at different times when it's appropriate.
Other questions? All right, let's take one from the Twitter universe. This is from MRCR Education, and they bring us to ESSA, so it's nice. ESSA calls for more parent and family engagement. Do you think that this, requirement, so to speak, will actually push forward the momentum to get parents involved in Common Core and so forth? Or do you think that people are going to draw that connection? What do we think about ESSA's requirement around that, and whether it might influence what we've been talking about here today with parents?
I think that part of that is due to the fact that you have this discrepancy between how teachers and educators feel about Common Core and how parents feel, so I think it's much needed. Parents are really important partners in mathematics. So beyond homework, which we already talked about, there's this, mathematics in the home, right? Like, think about the literacy stuff we do in the home. We could be stacking laundry and saying, we have 5 days of laundry. How many shirts do you think we're, washing if we have a family of 5? And there's driving down the road, just thinking about numeracy things. I quit saying to my son, you have to go to bed in 19 minutes, and started saying, he'd say, when's my bedtime? This was a few years back, and having him, look at the clock and find the difference. Again, focusing on difference as opposed to takeaway. So I think that we don't have that language in homes. I think there's a great parent education piece, games that can be played, numeracy things that can be just thought about in a natural way, the way we do a better job with literacy. And then there's an equity issue there as well, trying to make sure that we have an opportunity to help people who may not have understood mathematics in their own education come to understand the mathematics. That's really critical if we're going to reach, our high standards with everyone.
Okay. Any other thoughts on whether this new legislation is going to help our parent communication problem?
I mean, if anything, it'll bring attention to the issue, and there may be, policies or programs or whatnot written in that address the issue of parent communication and bring parents into the conversation. I think it's a good day when parents are arguing about math instruction. I remember a time when they didn't, and great for it to be a part of the conversation that parents are having.
I mean, I think most schools understand that parents are their partners, and that the more they can engage them, the better it is for everyone. So I think schools are doing their best to do that. Can some do more of it than others? Always. If legislation moves that along, I suppose that would be helpful, but I don't. I think all schools want that and try to achieve it with legislation or without it.
Yeah. Any other questions? All right, I see no more from the floor. Please join me in thanking my panel up here. Very helpful. Join us was useful for you guys, and please continue to tweet out what you're learning if you're on Twitter. I will encourage you guys to please stay and for our reception here. We've got some wine, I think, and beer and water and veggies and all kinds of good stuff. So please don't rush out into the 97 degrees. Make sure you get something cold to drink before you depart. And thank you again for joining us.